The Milwaukee Bucks is basically at his last legs right now, and honestly, it's kind of like a deer that's been shot trying to survive. It is one of the worst situations for both Giannis and Damian Lillard because they are both still in great positions in their career. They're not old enough to be considered like somebody who's basically fallen off, but they're at the point right now where they just simply have not been able to be cohesive with each other. The reality is that the Bucks front office basically messed up once they got rid of Drew Holiday, but they also failed to get pieces for Chris Middleton where, you need somebody to help kind of situate whatever bad knee injuries or bad ankle injuries that keep him out of the game for years and years at a time. And so there was a time where Chris Middleton had some pretty good trade value. But if you're not going to look to trade him, you have to basically just find players that you could probably bring in and do good work from the get-go. Unfortunately, they just haven't been able to do that. And I guess the best person that you can say that they got now is Kyle Kuzma. But Kyle Kuzma, in my opinion, is just simply not that great of a player. He hasn't really been that great of a player. I guess he's also been on a winning Lakers team. But in all honesty, they kind of won in spite of him. He had a pretty good year that year, but when it came to being in the bubble and playing well, he did not pretty much play well at all. And so they won that championship in spite of him, if you're going to ask me. But that's besides the video. The reality is now that the Milwaukee Bucks is at the worst possible point that they've been in for a very long time since they've had Giannis. And really, there's no fix for it. The issue really stems from Giannis because Giannis is not a player who, really wants to do all the things that's necessary to win in the sense that he needs to change the way he plays. Now, in terms of effort, you can never take away Giannis's effort and the amount of, steam that he gives every single play, both on each end of the court, whether it be offense, defense, no matter what. And even in the huddle, he is always active and always a part of the team. And so you always see that Giannis is very high motor, very high strung. However, I would say that he's very stubborn. Giannis's main ability or the main threat for him on the court is the fact that he can get to the rim. Damian Lillard's main threat on the court is the fact that he has range from the logo. So as much as we want to kind of invert the roles for a lot of players in different NBA teams, for the Milwaukee Bucks, the best way for them to kind of like get things going is really the pick and roll. Now, not the pick and roll where Giannis is the one holding the ball and he's asking Damian Lillard to set a pick and roll. No, the opposite, the more traditional approach, where you have Giannis setting the pick and then rolling towards the basket. And then, of course, Damian Lillard, he has a plethora of different moves where he can either shoot a step back three, shoot a floater, or whatever, shoot a mid-range. But the issue that stems from that is that simply does not happen enough, where you don't really see a lot of off-ball penetration from Giannis. He's more so kind of like the guy where he can get downhill with the ball as long as you can spread out the floor, which can work. However, in terms of winning basketball games in the playoffs, that is a very hard recipe to win. We've always seen the heliocentric nature of basketball, whether it be James Harden or, we can just stick with this Bucks team, that a one-player show cannot simply just win you a championship no matter how hard they try. You need everybody on the roster to have some type of fluidity. You need everybody on the roster to have some type of hands on the offense, hands on the ball, or just some type of flow. And when you watch the Milwaukee Bucks, there's really no flow there. As much as you really wish there is no flow there. And I think it really sucks because you have some pretty good players on the team. And you really have to hope, if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, you really have to hope that Brook Lopez has a great game every single game. Because if he doesn't, well, then you see they're not going to win very often because he is their best player outside of those two. Of course, he's not going to be the guy that lights up the scoreboard or the box score. He's not going to be the guy that really shows up a lot in that regard. But in terms of spreading the floor, his impact on the floor, shooting threes, being able to be a body in the lane, taking the big out of the lane as well for Giannis, he does a lot for that team that simply is not just going to be captured with box scores. But he is their third best player in my opinion. And they already gave away Chris Middleton for basically nothing. I mean, if you're a Kyle Kuzma fan, shout out to you. It's not many of you guys out there. But it sucks because the Milwaukee Bucks has the talent to kind of do a lot of good things, but they just don't have the cohesive nature. And this also stems from the fact that Damian Lillard is simply not a good second option. Not in the sense that he is not a good player to have as a second option. I just don't think he knows how to be the second option. He's always been a player that was always like the first option. He's always going to have the ball first and always going to make the decisions first to do whatever he wants to do. And then you kind of work around that. However, Giannis is the first option. And they have not really changed the way their offense runs. And so what happens when you have two people who don't have, well, at least one person doesn't believe that he should be the role that he is, but you have one guy who is like, I'm just going to always be the first option, then you're going to have the Milwaukee Bucks in that situation. And then you see that there's always problems when it comes to their pick and roll, whether it be Damian Lillard stopping way before he can actually give anybody a pocket pass, and then just like kind of like just resetting the game clock, or you have Giannis who, you get into the lane, or you try to get into the the between the free throw line and the rim, but then you see the wall, but because your teammates hasn't shot in like forever, their shots are inconsistent. And whenever you are a role player, one of the most important things for a role player to have is some type of consistency, where he is constantly having the ball at least once every 2 or 3 plays, feeling that you are within the offense, that fluidity, that tempo, and feeling warm. If you are a role player, you're not going to have the ball as much as like your top players. However, if you were to, let's say, just take a back cut, you get the ball and you pass it out to somebody else, that is enough to keep your hand-eye coordination good and settled and warm, because you're actually involved, right? But the Bucks offense is so haphazardly done that it's hard for other players to get involved. They're trying that in a way where they have either Giannis sitting out or Dame sitting out and letting, or both actually, and then letting the role players kind of like just do their thing. But the issue is that they have not been able to kind of consistently do their thing all year, because whenever the main top players get into the court, they just simply can't get the ball with enough frequency for them to be dangerous. And so expecting them to do something out of the ordinary is just simply not going to happen. And then also, of course, we have Doc Rivers, with all his faults, is running with a team that has a little bit of problems in their construction. But it's also up to him, if you're going to be the head coach, to make it work. And this is one of those teams where it's like, give a great head coach, a person that Giannis will at least respect enough to sacrifice, you'll probably see different results. Because at the end of the day, like I always say, your team, whoever your team is, has to be good enough to beat the best team. If you are within that realm of being a number one team, either it be in the East or the West, regardless, that's really what it comes down to. And if you make lateral moves like getting Kyle Kuzma, or just simply have not progressed to the point where you feel like you are threatening, let's say, the Boston Celtics, what are you going to do against them? We have Kristaps Porzingis, where you have a whole bunch of swings like, Jason Tatum's and Jaylen Brown, and then you have to deal with their guards and Pritchard and Derek White, and, you also have the other guys like Sam Howell. The issue is that the Boston Celtics is so good that there's really only one other team that is within their realm, and that is the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I think the Cleveland Cavaliers is that definitely having a great year, but the problem with them, in my opinion, is that they're too small. And if you can lock up Darius Garland and Damian Lillard, your best hope outside of them is Ty Jerome, where, hey, if you lose to Ty Jerome, you lose to Ty Jerome. But regardless, the Milwaukee Bucks is just simply nowhere near both of those teams. They don't even look good. And also, one other thing that, I haven't really thought about it before until Jeff Teague said it one time, but really the vibes is very important. The Cleveland Cavaliers is vibing. They're gelling. They feel confident. The Boston Celtics is vibing. They're gelling. They feel confident. But can you say the same about the Milwaukee Bucks? Absolutely not. They're not vibing. They're not gelling. And honestly, they're playing horrible, especially if you're Damian Lillard, who's having one of the worst stretches that he's had basically all season, playing terrible, not being able to shoot the ball consistently, and just simply not being able to be a good point guard. And so the Milwaukee Bucks, who Well, a long time ago, I predicted that they were going to not do well and break up their back three in one of my older videos. But if there's anything I know, one thing I do know is that I know when teams are going to basically blow things up. Okay, I'm a Chicago Bulls fans. We've seen that like basically every 2 or 3 years. And right now, this is it. We see the last bastion of hope for the Milwaukee Bucks. Maybe they'll be able to get some picks, which they should, get some really good young talent. They got to trade away these guys. I don't care where they go. They got to get rid of all these guys because you want to start early rebuilding than to start late.